The U.S. and Israeli militaries have attacked Iran's missile infrastructure, hitting dozens of launch locations and production centers. Satellite images show a lot of devastation. Experts say these strikes greatly weaken Iran's ability to launch missiles immediately, but the threat is far from over. Everyone is watching as tensions rise and Iran can fire missiles. The battlefield is more complicated and deadly due to the involvement of several regional actors. Experts say this is a watershed point that might influence Middle East politics for years. Months of secret operations, hacking, and military planning led to this escalation. The U.S. and Israel are concerned about Iran's missile development because improved long-range missiles could change the balance of power. The current strikes aim to prevent this. Several news reports say 29 Iranian missile launch facilities were targeted. Main buildings in Khojir, Parchin, Hakimiyeh, and Sharud were damaged. Iran's strategic capabilities are harmed by eliminating these ballistic missile development sites. Despite damage, Iran has recovered. Mobile launchers and distributed systems allow missile fire. Experts say the strikes reduce the threat's damage but don't remove it. This lets the war continue, and both sides must prepare for weeks or months of fighting. International concern is growing as the war's effects spread beyond Iran and Israel. Yemeni Houthis are firing missiles and drones, and proxy groups are watching them. A regional battle between numerous countries is more likely than ever, and every strategic move could affect global stability. Traders are watching military movements, strikes, and Iran's ability to retaliate with missiles, and global markets are reacting to every change. Analysts say even a short-term rise in tensions could affect global commerce and energy markets. On the ground, civilian life is getting more and more difficult. Humanitarian groups are helping thousands of families leave their homes and run out of basic necessities. The conflict's toll on people makes diplomatic efforts more important, but conversations have not gone far. The conflict is complex. Both sides have advanced missiles, drones, and cyber capabilities. Intelligence sources suggest Iran will respond to more attacks, which could escalate the conflict. The world is watching, fearing a regional conflict if one step goes wrong. The stakes are clear. The U.S. and Israel want to stop Iran's missile program, but Iran's strength and alliances in the region make this a long and unpredictable conflict. People, governments, and global markets will watch the next few days and weeks to see if this situation can be controlled or escalates. Iran, Israel, and the U.S. have long been hostile. Different ideologies, military techniques, and political systems have pitted these nations against each other for decades. Iran's missile program might allow Tehran to reach targets across the region fast and accurately, worrying the U.S. and Israel. The U.S. has maintained a strong presence in the Middle East to defend itself from Iran. Israel has prevented Iran from manufacturing long-range missiles through secret missions and intelligence operations. These activities have heightened tensions, and any miscalculation could start a conflict. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal was a brief period of diplomacy and relative peace. It was meant to constrain Iran's nuclear goals in exchange for lifting sanctions. However, in 2018, the U.S. pulled out of the deal, reimposing sanctions and putting more pressure on Tehran. This led to retaliation and proxy wars in the region. In recent years, Iran has built a network of launch sites and production facilities across the country to upgrade its missile technology. Satellite photographs and intelligence assessments reveal these locations are growing, worrying Washington and Tel Aviv. Since Iran's missile program has mobile and subterranean systems, air and sabotage attacks are harder. Preemptive actions to avoid threats have been key to Israel's strategic theory. Thus, many secret missions have targeted Iranian military assets inside Iran and in neighboring countries. Years of political actions and mistrust between parties have led to the rise in violence. To protect its own and its allies' interests, the U.S. has closely monitored and limited Iran's military capabilities in the region. American troops have watched, trained with allies, and fought Iranian-backed groups in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen to limit Iran's strength. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey have changed their positions based on how much they think Iran is a threat or how much the U.S. supports them. Proxy wars in Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon have complicated the geopolitical situation, making any conflict between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. dangerous. War and smart diplomacy caused our crisis. Iran's missile program is becoming a threat. Israel and the U.S. have proved they are willing to take forceful action to eliminate threats, making the situation unstable and allowing even modest incidents to lead to a large-scale war. Analysts stress the importance of historical context. The present strikes are part of decades of strife. Each military action, political move, and intelligence operation builds on the previous one, making the conflict intricate and unpredictable. The conflict today is not unique due to historical competition, technological advancement, and regional dominance shifts. It is the result of decades of strategic preparation, proxy warfare, and repeated escalation and negotiation. The ramifications of this ongoing struggle extend beyond the battlefield. They impact regional and global security. The U.S. and Israeli military bombed Iran's missile launch sites and production facilities from the air, damaging 29 launch sites and 4 main production complexes and reducing Iran's missile capability. Iran is still able to operate despite these strikes. The government has mobile missile launchers and underground storage facilities, so the region is still on high alert. Experts say the quick attack has made it harder for Iran to strike, but it can't eliminate the threat. The strikes targeted Iran's ballistic missile program's Khojir, Parchin, Hakamiyeh, and Sharud facilities. These stations are major targets for the U.S. and Israel because experts claim they can enable long-range and short-range missile launches. Iran has responded with limited missile attacks, proving its missile systems are still operational despite their reduced quantity. The situation is precarious, and both sides will escalate if threatened. International watchers worry that any miscalculation could escalate regional conflict. The Houthis in Yemen have formally entered the conflict by launching missile and drone attacks against Israeli sites. This adds more active theaters of conflict and increases the risk of a regional war. U.S. troops in the Middle East have sent more troops in response to the growing conflict. Military experts say the U.S.'s quick deployment shows how seriously it takes the situation. Intelligence agencies think Iran's missile program is still decentralized. Iran has hidden caches and mobile launch platforms to keep ready after its most key facilities were destroyed. Israeli and U.S. planners plan to substantially impair Iran's missile capabilities, but this ability to modify made it impossible. The most recent assaults have also damaged civilian settlements and infrastructure in the region. Satellite photos and accounts show that highways, bridges, and other non-military buildings were damaged. Humanitarian groups are preparing to deal with civilian effects and ensure that aid reaches those in need. Global reactions were swift. Nations are seeking calm while considering their security interests. The UN and regional groups have called for discussions, but fast-paced military measures make diplomatic solutions difficult. The region could be in for a long war because Iran can still launch counterattacks. The Houthis have joined the conflict, and U.S. and Israeli forces are on high alert. Every new strike makes things worse, so the next few days are crucial for military and diplomatic consequences. Military experts say the U.S. and Israel used satellite intelligence to precision bomb launch locations, production facilities, and command centers to limit Iran's ability to operate without starting a war. Iran's missile program is very decentralized, which makes it harder to stop. Mobile launchers, subterranean silos, and distributed production units allow Iran to continue after significant damage, experts say. Recent strikes may only temporarily lower the threat level. Israel's military doctrine stresses quick intelligence gathering and preemptive strikes. Attacking Iranian facilities could lead to a long-term retaliation campaign. Even though it is mostly focused on strategic containment, the U.S. has sent more troops and monitoring equipment to the area to prevent Iran or its allies from escalating the crisis and give the U.S. a quick response if they do. Military planners said even small Iranian attacks could make deployed soldiers less ready. The Houthis' involvement changes the battle's tactics. Despite their inferior missiles and drones, they give Iran more fronts and pressure points. Israeli and U.S. analysts say this makes command and control difficult because they now have to consider many attack vectors. Iran and Israel have reportedly launched targeted cyber attacks against each other's infrastructure to disrupt communication, logistics, and early warning systems, adding an important but unseen element to the war. Experts emphasize the importance of supply chains and logistics for missile operations. Iran's ability to fix damaged sites, move missile parts secretly, and maintain its command structures makes it strong. U.S. and Israeli forces must upgrade their intelligence to hit their targets without missing important ones. The war shows how modern wars are waged. Long-range information, precision-guided munitions, unmanned drones, and cyber capabilities create a virtual and actual battlefield. What happened here could affect Middle Eastern military policy for years, analysts warn. After the strikes, Iran still has a large stockpile of short, medium, and long-range ballistic missiles and mobile platforms, making a response likely. Military planners stress that airstrikes alone won't end this battle and that containment may be needed for a long time. Ongoing military operations demonstrate a shaky balance. U.S. and Israeli forces desire to limit Iran's capabilities without war. However, Iran and its allies want to prove they can persevere and halt others. Every tactical decision in the next several days could affect global and regional security. The rise in tensions between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. has shook the Middle East. Regional powers are watching and changing their alliances and plans. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are trying to balance supporting U.S.-led projects and maintaining good relations with their neighbors. This war is dominated by proxy wars. The Iranian-allied Yemeni Houthis are bombing Israeli targets with missiles and drones. Iranian-backed militias are preparing for operations in Syria and Lebanon, complicating the military situation. Proxy forces expand the fight and make it harder to predict, say experts. Israel wants to take Iran's missiles, but Turkey, Qatar, and Iraq want to protect their interests without getting engaged in the war. The likelihood of error is high. Due to the number of people involved, a military strike could mistakenly harm civilian areas or force other states to retaliate. Experts caution that even modest issues can escalate, including other nations and making diplomatic resolution tougher. Because the Gulf is a major oil hub, international commerce and energy markets are closely monitoring what happens next. Any violence that affects shipping lanes or production facilities could affect the global economy. The fighting has affected regional diplomacy. UN and other foreign entities' discussion facilitation efforts have gone poorly. Many people fear things will become worse, but the key parties don't trust each other, making negotiations difficult. Only military involvement can change things. Some powerful countries in the area are quietly building up their military strength. Countries share intelligence, drill, and handle logistics. This displays Middle Eastern relationships' interdependence. Analysts say this covert support can shift the balance in unexpected ways, making the situation uncomfortable and unpredictable. As the violence escalates, the U.S., Europe, and Asia are monitoring it. They realize Middle East turmoil may affect global trade, energy, and security. Relief migrations, broken supply chains, and regional infrastructure stress are emerging in nearby countries. Countries near conflict zones are making backup plans to deal with possible crises due to military and civilian pressure. The region is deeply affected by this fight. This affects Iran, Israel, and many other nations, proxy groups, and a wider battle. This multi-layered geopolitical issue might transform the Middle East for years. The battle between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. is still ongoing and is already affecting the world economy. Traders are reacting to possible problems in the Gulf region, which supplies much of the world's energy, by driving up oil prices. Any increase in attacks on important oil infrastructure or shipping waterways could cause even more instability. Maritime trade routes, especially the Strait of Hormuz, are closely monitored because they carry a lot of oil from around the world. Any obstruction could cause delays, higher fuel prices, and supply chain issues. Experts say long-term instability could affect global markets. In reaction, financial markets have become more volatile. Stocks, commodities, and currencies are affected by recent news. As geopolitical risk escalates, investors seek safer investments. Gold, U.S. Treasury bonds, and other safe havens are rising in popularity. Iran faces sanctions and infrastructure damage, while its neighbors must spend money on defense, humanitarian relief, and disaster preparedness, which could affect the region's long-term economic growth and stability. This conflict worries countries beyond the Middle East because even small changes in the oil supply can affect fuel prices and manufacturing costs. Industries that need a steady supply of electricity are especially at risk. To lower risk, countries may seek alternative energy sources, trade routes, or economic partnerships, which could affect global business and investment, according to experts. The cost of war isn't just military spending. Shipping, infrastructure, and emergency insurance expenses rise during wartime, putting local businesses at risk and potentially raising prices for global customers. Central banks and financial authorities monitor the battle. Rising energy prices and market uncertainty could generate inflation. Policymakers would have to adjust interest rates and monetary policies. Economic effects of the war may extend beyond the conflict zone. Humanitarian disasters and displacement also affect the economy. Refugee flows strain other countries' housing, jobs, and public services. International relief groups have to raise funds from governments and individuals. Rising energy prices, trade issues, market instability, and higher expenses are already being felt around the world due to the Iran-Israel-US conflict. Economists say that if the conflict continues, these effects could worsen and have long-term effects on the world's economy. The lengthy battle is rapidly costing people. Military activity and missile strikes have displaced thousands. Families are looking for safer places to stay, but packed shelters and lack of food, water, and medical treatment are common. Local hospitals and clinics are struggling to treat the large number of injured people. Resources are scarce, and experts say the number of deaths is rising. Humanitarian groups are gathering supplies, but the size of the problem makes it difficult to help right away. Refugee influx affect neighboring countries. Countries near conflict zones are preparing to create temporary housing, schools, and hospitals for displaced people. International aid agencies are providing food, water, and sanitation, but the need exceeds the supply. The interruption of basic services like electricity, water, and transportation has made civilian suffering worse. Broken infrastructure helps relief workers access to towns that need assistance. The humanitarian situation is getting worse as the conflict goes on. Food security is becoming a big problem. Essentials are becoming more expensive, supply networks are collapsing, and markets are disturbed. Low-income families must choose survival over school or health care. The afflicted people struggle more due to economic hardship. Psychological trauma is also increasing. Missile strikes and instability are causing tension, anxiety, and panic worldwide. Mental health issues aren't well treated, and experts worry they could harm a generation. The UN has called for humanitarian aid, but military activities and tensions make it difficult for aid convoys to reach the hardest-hit districts safely. Governments and NGOs must work together to avoid delays in vital aid. Multi-front warfare makes it tougher to provide constant aid and security to civilians. Families can't find secure spots since attacks come from all sides, and many have to migrate numerous times. Education and social services are also affected. Kids can't learn like usual because schools are closed. Social initiatives that support the needy have been halted or adjusted to fulfill survival needs, which will affect community health. Overall, the humanitarian situation is terrible, Civilians are suffering from being forced to leave their homes, not having enough medical care, food, psychological stress, and services disrupted. Immediate help is needed, but the fighting has lasted so long that humanitarian issues will likely last months or years. Military experts believe the next few weeks will determine the outcome of the conflict between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. Iran is likely to use mobile launchers and covert sites to stay ready for action, which could lead to frequent retaliatory strikes that keep the region on edge. According to experts, Israel will continue to launch preemptive strikes against new Iranian infrastructure to slow Iran's missile program, but each strike could provoke Iran and its regional allies, worsening the crisis. Proxy forces, like the Houthis in Yemen, will probably keep taking part. Analysts say these groups' missile and drone attacks make it tougher to organize defenses. The fight is impossible to predict because so many individuals are involved. Diplomacy will likely increase, but not soon. International powers want quiet, but the primary participants don't trust each other, making negotiations difficult. Analysts say discussing may reduce tensions temporarily, but a long-term solution requires global engagement and security guarantees. Due to growing oil costs, trade issues, and market instability, state and non-state entities may make different decisions. Gulf energy-dependent nations may want a ceasefire or de-escalation to protect their economies. Intelligence agencies believe cyber warfare will continue alongside physical attacks. Both sides have disrupted communications, logistics, and missile guidance systems with digital capabilities. Future wars will likely involve cyber attacks and regular strikes, complicating the battlefield. Fighting will worsen conditions for the needy. Regional governments and international aid agencies will face additional displacement, food shortages, and psychological suffering. Military strategy and long-term humanitarian readiness are needed to prevent the crisis from worsening, say experts. Mistakes are possible, warn military analysts. Small attacks could spread to neighboring countries or escalate to larger ones. To avoid unexpected escalation, military movements and missile activity must be monitored. Iran may use proxy groups or third-party countries to negotiate and use limited missile strikes, according to some experts. However, Israel and the U.S. may continue targeted efforts to stop Iran without war. This tenuous balance will determine the conflict in the coming weeks. The projection predicts long-term tension and occasional military action. Active missile programs, proxy involvement, regional rivalries, and economic pressures make the situation unpredictable, but full-scale conflict seems unlikely. Citizens and international visitors must keep attentive as events unfold. The dispute between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. is one of the most important geopolitical issues of the last few years. What began as targeted missile strikes has escalated into a multi-layered conflict with regional and global repercussions. We must monitor the situation closely. This fight is still hurting locals most. Infrastructure damage, homelessness, and lack of essential amenities are the human cost of conflict. The news focuses on military goals, but millions of families are suffering from the fighting. The world has become more interdependent than ever, as shown by rising oil prices, trade issues, and unstable global markets. Governments and corporations must stay abreast of these changes and adjust their plans as needed. The next few weeks will be very important. Iran, Israel, and the U.S. will decide whether the crisis worsens or can be stopped by strategic, diplomatic, and humanitarian efforts. Analysts advise being alert and planning ahead to avoid unintended consequences. Viewers need to stay up to date more than ever to understand the complexity of this dispute. Knowledge empowers people to read the news responsibly and have important conversations. Finally, this story continues. The international community must intervene to encourage diplomatic solutions, protect civilians, and address economic impacts of new knowledge. The world is watching, and the decisions made in the next few days and weeks will have far-reaching implications. To live in an increasingly unpredictable environment, stay in touch with reliable sources, keep up with what's happening, and think about how events around the world affect your community. By staying informed, asking questions, and supporting humanitarian efforts, people may help highlight the human side of the situation. Every informed action matters. Remember that things are changing quickly. People, nations, and the world economy are all affected. Stay watchful, up to date, and watch what occurs. The Middle East is a war for countries today and a key period for world peace.